Welcome back to Epic Ranking. Today, we're diving into the best of the best, the Game of the Year winners since 2014. But what if we told you some of these winners might not have been the absolute best of their year? We're ranking them based on how good they really were. And for some, we'll suggest a game that might have deserved the crown instead. Let's jump in. Blizzard's Overwatch was a colorful, fast-paced breath of fresh air for the FPS genre. With its quirky heroes, team-focused gameplay, and accessibility, it had players yelling, "I need healing," in no time. Whether you were a sneaky Reaper or a flying Mercy, Overwatch was all about working together, and a lot of random matchmaking chaos, let's be honest. It was a game that almost anyone could jump into and have fun, which is a huge reason why it won Game of the Year. But here's the catch. Overwatch was strictly a multiplayer experience. While it nailed the hero-based shooter formula, it lacked a deeper story or single-player content. You didn't have an emotional, narrative-driven experience to cling to, unless, of course, you were emotionally attached to missing your ult for the 50th time. What should have won instead? Doom, 2016. The Doom reboot was like strapping yourself into a roller coaster that's on fire. It was pure, unfiltered chaos, with the most satisfying combat system in years. Blasting demons with a shotgun never got old, and the game had this primal, adrenaline-pumping energy that made you feel invincible. Plus, it was single-player gold. No need to rely on teammates who never seemed to pick a healer. Dragon Age Inquisition marked a triumphant return for BioWare after Dragon Age 2's more linear approach. Inquisition gave players a massive, sprawling world filled with dragons, political intrigue, and enough side quests to keep you busy for about eternity. The story was rich, and the characters were as charming as ever, especially when you weren't running around collecting 57 herbs to make a single potion. However, despite its ambition, Inquisition had some pacing issues. It wasn't so much that the game was slow, it was more that it sometimes felt like you were drowning in side activities that didn't contribute much to the grand narrative. And honestly, if I had to close one more rift, I'd probably have been tempted to join the dark side. What should have won instead? Middle-earth: Shadow of Mordor. With its groundbreaking Nemesis system, Shadow of Mordor changed how players interacted with enemies. Orcs remembered you, held grudges, and leveled up if they killed you, which made each encounter personal. It was like going to a reunion where everyone hated you. Fun, right? Plus, the combat was fluid and satisfying, and the world was just plain fun to explore. In 2023, Baldur's Gate 3 rolled a nat 20 and cast a charm spell on the entire gaming community. Larian Studios delivered an epic RPG that gave players immense freedom, complex moral decisions, and memorable companions. The sheer depth of the game meant that no two playthroughs were alike, which is impressive considering the size of this sprawling D&D adventure. Plus, who doesn't love throwing enemies off cliffs with telekinesis? It's a core gaming experience. But, and I'm casting minor criticism here, Baldur's Gate 3's scope could be a little overwhelming. With so many choices and outcomes, it sometimes felt like you needed a degree in fantasy management just to keep track of everything. And let's not talk about how long some of us spent in character creation. Paralysis by analysis is real. What should have won instead? Resident Evil 4 Remake. The Resident Evil 4 Remake took one of the most beloved survival horror games of all time and made it even better. Leon Kennedy's adventure against hordes of parasites and chainsaw-wielding maniacs was tense, action-packed, and visually stunning. The remake didn't just polish an old gem, it redefined it for modern audiences with tight controls and masterful pacing. Sometimes the simplest solution is the right one. Just give me a shotgun and let me handle business. From Software delivered another soul-crushing hit with Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice, trading the gothic horror of Bloodborne for the elegance of feudal Japan. Sekiro's combat was razor-sharp, forcing players to master precise timing and parrying. The bosses were as punishing as ever, but when you finally overcame one, you felt like you'd climbed Mount Everest. Plus, there was something deeply satisfying about sneaking up on a samurai and whispering, "Surprise," with a quick blade to the back. However, Sekiro leaned heavily on its technical prowess and difficulty. It didn't have the deep lore or character development found in other From Software titles, and the story was more straightforward than the usual mystery box narratives of Dark Souls or Bloodborne. For some players, that made it feel a bit too focused on mechanics over emotional connection. What should have won instead? Resident Evil 2 Remake. This remake wasn't just a facelift, it was a full-on reimagining of the survival horror classic. The atmosphere was chilling, the zombies were more terrifying than ever, and the game's pacing was nearly perfect. Resident Evil 2 balanced tension, horror, and exploration like few games ever have, making it a standout in 2019. Leon and Claire deserve to walk away with that GOTY trophy. From Software took their brutal, punishing formula and blew it wide open with Elden Ring. Players were thrust into a massive, hauntingly beautiful open world full of dark secrets, grotesque enemies, and bosses that made you cry, in a good way. The freedom to explore, discover, and die, a lot, at your own pace, was revolutionary. Elden Ring gave us a world that felt alive and demanded to be conquered. But let's be honest, Elden Ring isn't for everyone. The difficulty curve is about as welcoming as a brick to the face, and while veterans of Dark Souls reveled in the challenge, newcomers might have found themselves repeatedly flattened. Plus, some players missed the more structured narrative found in games like God of War. What should have won instead? God of War Ragnarok. Ragnarok took everything that was great about God of War 2018 and cranked it up to 11. The Norse saga reached its climax with an emotional, heart-pounding adventure that combined masterful storytelling, incredible combat, and unforgettable characters. It was the perfect continuation of Kratos and Atreus' journey, and it hit all the right notes without the "what am I doing" moments that Elden Ring sometimes caused. The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt is one of those rare games that delivers on every front. Story, world building, characters, and even those side quests that somehow became more interesting than the main plot. Geralt of Rivia's journey through a war-torn land filled with monsters, political intrigue, and moral ambiguity was a defining RPG experience. Plus, who could forget Gwent? It was the game within a game that we didn't know we needed. However, the one minor complaint some players had was the combat. While serviceable, it wasn't as tight or refined as the rest of the game. It didn't have the visceral, skill-based feel that other action RPGs delivered, which led to some just swing and hope for the best moments. What should have won instead? Bloodborne. From Software's gothic masterpiece offered an experience that was intense, atmospheric, and utterly unforgiving. The fast-paced combat, terrifying bosses, and interconnected world design made every moment feel like life or death. Bloodborne may not have had the same narrative depth as The Witcher 3, but in terms of gameplay and atmosphere, it was an unforgettable journey into madness. When God of War made its triumphant return in 2018, it was more than just a reboot. It was a reinvention. Kratos, once a symbol of pure rage and destruction, was now a complex, brooding father figure, and the dynamic between him and his son, Atreus, added emotional depth never before seen in the series. The combat was brutal but strategic, with the Leviathan axe becoming one of the most satisfying weapons in gaming history. Plus, the one-shot camera perspective made every moment feel personal and intense. If there's any criticism to be made, it's that the game's pacing slowed down in certain sections, particularly during some of the more puzzle-heavy moments. But that's nitpicking. God of War was a near-flawless experience. What should have won instead? Red Dead Redemption 2. Rockstar's sprawling epic told the heartbreaking story of Arthur Morgan and the downfall of the van der Linde gang. It was a masterpiece of storytelling, with a world so detailed and immersive that players lost themselves in its sheer scope. Every corner of the map was packed with life, and the emotional weight of Arthur's journey was unmatched. It was a close race, but RDR2 could have easily taken the top spot. The The Last of Us Part 2 was a visually stunning, emotionally heavy game that pushed the boundaries of storytelling in video games. It was bold, divisive, and unflinching in its portrayal of violence and revenge. The game's performances were some of the best we've ever seen, and the world Naughty Dog created was as immersive as it was brutal. That said, the story's darker direction and some of its narrative choices left a portion of the fanbase feeling alienated. What should have won instead? Ghost of Tsushima. Sucker Punch's open-world samurai epic was visually breathtaking, with fluid combat and a compelling narrative that honored classic samurai films. The freedom to explore the beautiful island of Tsushima while crafting your own combat style as the Honorable Samurai or Stealthy Ghost gave players a more universally satisfying experience. It struck a perfect balance between storytelling, exploration, and action. It Takes Two was a delightful surprise. A heartfelt co-op experience that blended inventive gameplay mechanics with a touching story about a couple on the brink of divorce. The game was bursting with creativity, with each level introducing new mechanics and challenges that kept players on their toes. Whether you were shrinking down to size in a garden or battling sentient vacuum cleaners, the game never ran out of fun ideas. Plus, it was a co-op game that required actual cooperation. Imagine that. Honestly, It Takes Two fully deserved the Game of the Year award. It was a rare gem that showcased the magic of gaming as a shared experience, making it a worthy champion of 2021. Breath of the Wild didn't just reinvent the Zelda series, it redefined what open-world games could be. Hyrule was a sandbox of possibilities, where players could climb, cook, fight, and glide their way through a world filled with hidden secrets. The sense of exploration and discovery was unparalleled, and the freedom to tackle puzzles and dungeons in any order was revolutionary. Sure, some fans missed the more structured dungeons of previous Zelda games, and the weapon durability system had people cursing under their breath. But these were minor quibbles in an otherwise stellar experience. What should have won instead? Let's be real. Nothing could top Breath of the Wild in 2017. It was a game that captured the imagination of millions and set a new standard for open-world design. No competition here. It earned its spot as Game of the Year. And that wraps up our ranking of Game of the Year winners. Some nailed it. Others had a worthy contender breathing down their necks. What do you think? Did we get it right? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more epic rankings. Until next time, this is Epic Ranking, signing off.